Welcome to the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show with Larry Lawson. As a former career law enforcement officer and law enforcement educator, Larry focuses on the use of tried and true law enforcement investigative techniques in conducting paranormal investigations. Despite his experience and training, Larry also keeps an open mind to discussions on topics that deal with evidence that are not quite as physical in nature. Paranormal Stakeout guests are professionals in the field of the paranormal and parapsychology, conducting the investigations and research needed to further the cause of paranormal study. Larry advocates an agenda of standardization of structure and training in the field of paranormal investigation and research for the purpose of one day being able to produce the evidence needed to convince a jury of the existence of the paranormal. Whether it is ghosts, UFOs, unsolved mysteries, hauntings or cryptids, no topic is beyond the investigative reach of Larry Lawson and the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show team. Now, here is the host of the Paranormal Stakeout radio TV show, Larry Lawson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal Stakeout. I'm your host, Larry Lawson, coming to you from beautiful Vero Beach, a place where I like to say that paranormal and the tropics collide. Also, the home of Indian River Hauntings and the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigations. If you'd like to find out a little bit about what we're doing there, please visit our websites at paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com. You can also check us out on YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341. But most importantly, on the X Zone Radio and TV network, you can find me at paranormalstakeout.org. If you'd like to send me a note, ask me some questions, have something you'd like me to bring up at the beginning of each show, you can get a hold of me by sending me a message at ghostguy@paranormalstakeout.org. So check us out and let me know what you think. Tonight is kind of an exciting show. I've been looking forward to it. This is one of those times where we're going to be able to discuss not only science, but the spiritual at the same time. So my guest tonight, Mark Fiorentino. He's an author who's been obsessed with Einstein's unified theory ever since hearing about it at the age of 10. He worked for many years in the high-tech industry, including IBM and Harris Corporation. He has now retired and is an author. And oddly enough, he's probably the only person I've ever met that has the same birthday as Albert Einstein. And that's who we're going to talk about tonight. So with that, I'd like to welcome Mark Fiorentino to the show. Welcome, Mark, to Paranormal Stakeout, my friend.
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, lots to talk about. One of the things I like to do in this show is combine the scientific analysis of the spiritual world. And I think what you do is a terrific way to do it. But my audience, I'd like to get them to know you a little bit. Tell them a little bit about your background, how you got into this field.
Yeah, started at the age of 10, was going to catechism classes, and the nuns asked us to find a saint on our birthday. And that was in 1965, and there was no internet then. And so finding that was not so easy. All you had is a calendar and what other people might know. I asked my parents. They weren't familiar with any saints. I went over to the calendar, and I still remember doing this, going over to the calendar on the kitchen wall and looking at my birth date, and I saw Albert Einstein's name there.
Yeah.
So from there, I went to the encyclopedia and started reading about Einstein, eventually unified field theory, fell in love with that and fell in love with science. And from that day forward, I started studying everything I could learn about the unified field theory, thinking certainly in my lifetime I would read that somebody solved the problem. And I waited and I read and I waited. And I guess in the end, the person I was waiting for was me, because I wound up doing it in my retirement years. I wrote a book, 4 years in the writing, and went through and worked on and found the math to explain what gravity is. And so that's included in my book now. But through all those years, there were many incidences, psychic incidences, that kind of was pointing to something big in my retirement, but I just kind of drifted along and did my thing all the way up until my retirement time. And there was some successes I had at IBM with mathematics, making discoveries there that said, hey, you have a shot at doing it. And that was in the year 1993. And from that time forward, I started studying with the purpose of maybe someday writing a book or something of that nature. So that's how we got here today.
Mhm. Well, a lot of folks are familiar with, obviously, Albert Einstein, his general and special theories of relativity, but the unified field theory, explain what that is to us.
It was a grand idea. It was the correct idea. And basically, it's this: electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. So, to put it in even simpler terms, basically they had this idea that there was this one field, they called it the ether or space, and that was a
Mhm,
real thing, considered a real thing back before the year 1905. All the way up from Newton's time until then, they thought for sure there was an ether until they had this one experiment that they thought disproved its existence. That's an error that's in history that I had to correct. Um, that would be the fundamental field. In the other fields like magnetism, electrostatic field, and gravity are just deformations of the quasi-elastic solid, which was the fundamental and is the fundamental field. So you twist it this way or that way, you expand it or you can contract it. Those are the forces that we see. Action at a distance comes through these slight deformations of the quasi-elastic field. And I should, for the people who don't know what that is, quasi means if I go out in the outer space and I hold a magnet out there, field wraps around it, the space bends to the shape of the magnetic field. I remove it, it snaps back into place. Elastic means it can be stretched and pulled in slight deformations one way or the other. And
mhm.
solid, that's the tricky one, just simply means something that is continuous. It is not made of parts. So that's what the unified field theory is. They wanted to reconnect electromagnetism, electrostatic field, and magnetic field, and
Okay.
somehow find a way for it to connect to gravity and make the gravitational field, which I've done. It's in my research paper on ResearchGate. I
Mhm.
found the way, the causal nexus of gravity, where it comes from mechanically, and it's nothing but a contraction of space.
So, kind of help this old cop here, this old flatfoot that may not be quite at that level with you. You're talking about you've got the magnetic field, electric field, but this you're talking about one other extra field in space that is actually connected to magnetic field. Am I getting this right?
All the fields are just bendings. Like gravity is a bending of space. That's what Einstein proved with his last
Okay.
set of field theory field equations. Just
Hmm.
a slight bending. What I've confirmed is that bending is a contraction. And he even confirms this. I don't know if I want to go there, but
Well, how did you confirm it? How were you able to confirm it yourself? I know
um,
you're in the
I
electro.
I looked for Einstein. I did a lot of research. Thank God for the internet. I could shoot across the different parts of the internet to find documents, and I looked for a particular anywhere where he would say the words contraction and gravity,
Mhm,
and I found that eventually in a document from Amir Excel's book called God's Equation, in which he talks about Einstein's happiest thought. And in there, Einstein mentions through something called the Ehrenfest paradox. I can explain it to you if you want. If you want, I'll give you a quick shot at it.
give us a
Einstein
quick shot.
followed the line of reasoning that began with his happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he conducted one of his famous thought experiments. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. Einstein
Okay.
compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool he had used in developing the special relativity theory. Now, pay close attention. I underlined this in bold and bolded it. He concluded, using his special relativity, that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. There was a force acting on the circle at the boundary called the centrifugal force, and its action was analogous to that of the gravitational force. But that same contraction that affected the outer circle left the diameter unchanged. Thus, Einstein concluded in a way that surprised even him. The ratio of the circle to the diameter was no longer pi. He deduced that in the presence of a gravitational field, the geometry of space was non Euclidean. Basically, all it's saying there is that if we take any kind of particles or anything and accelerate them, a circular motion is accelerated
Mhm.
motion. And he said the equivalence principle, acceleration and gravity are somehow the same, but he didn't know until he read about that himself. And he wrote several more papers pointing to that. And he spent the last days of his life trying to make that into a mechanical model that would explain gravity. In other words, what I did, what he didn't know, he was born too early. What he didn't know was there was quarks inside of the neutron and the proton, and they were moving in a particular pattern. This pattern right here, I don't know if we could see it that well. It's a trefoil knot,
Mhm.
and that was was necessary to create the contraction, because that those quarks are moving at, I calculated, 99% the speed of light. And so that created a sphere that was rotating and precessing wildly, and that caused a contraction at the perimeter. That's where gravity comes from. It was just that simple. So then I used the moment of inertia equations to say I can predict the neutron and proton mass, and I did succeed in doing that, and I've given that to other physicists to look at and verify, and
Well,
that's where gravity comes from.
and one of the topics I want to get in with you tonight, how does this affect things such as space travel, our dealing with the speed of light? Does this all connect?
This was part of my search. I figured if I could understand how gravity could work, then you got to make the link to anti-gravity, because obviously that's what our buddies in other civilizations have realized. They've fully understood the unified field theory, because anti-gravity is part of gravity and part of the unified field theory. Einstein never even really dreamed about that, and neither has other physicists really, because they just think it's science fiction. But
Mhm.
it's not, because obviously uh, the people who have gotten here from other worlds use anti-gravity, and somehow using anti-gravity also enabled them to break the light speed barrier,
Okay.
because
Well, we're
there's
we're we're about ready to take our first break. So when we get back, let's start talking about how our friends and other civilizations, as you put it, use this theory to travel. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back with this fascinating conversation right after these messages. And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout with my guest tonight, Mark Fiorentino. Question right off the top: do you believe space travel is possible from other universes to us? Do you believe
yes,
that's
I'm
possible?
absolutely positive that that's
Okay.
possible.
With that, you were talking about Einstein's theories, and then you started to head into the world of anti-gravity and space travel. How does that all connect? Tell us your
uh,
theory on that.
well, in pursuing the anti-gravity angle, and yeah, I first had to know how gravity works, solve that problem. I understand it's a contraction of space. So the next thing is to figure out how to get space to expand. Expanding space is the trick to breaking the light speed barrier and creating something which I call the slip wave.
Okay.
Um, why is expanding space so important? Because it affects that's going to be discovered, that it affects two properties, permittivity and permeability of space. These are measurable properties that you can take a test instrument out into outer space and you can measure it. That means space is a real something. It wouldn't have these detectable properties otherwise, and they have to do with the way the electric field and the magnetic field develop and
Mhm.
are controlled within space. And who discovered that? James Clerk Maxwell, who back in his day discovered that c, the speed of light, equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. So if you play with that equation and you drop those numbers, which are already very small, speed of light goes up. So he who masters outer space biases it, spatially biases it with a field that causes those two properties to drop. That spaceship can go much faster than the speed of light, not just a little bit. I'm talking tens of thousands of times. And if you were to drop those values to zero by pulling space way apart, now you could go infinitely fast. And that's been done in metamaterials that I've read about on the internet, where they've modified the material in such a way that its permittivity and permeability is dropped to zero. And they claim that they shine light in that and it goes infinitely fast. Now, there's some controversy about that, and the physicists are arguing about that, but that's the claim. But it makes sense. It backs up the math. The math backs it up. That's what we would expect to happen if you indeed drop those two properties of space down to zero or near zero. So that's how our alien buddies, I am confident, are breaking the light speed barrier. And I'm talking the entry level technology that we could use to do the very same thing and get to other star systems, get to Mars. Mars could easily be gotten to in 15 minutes or less. That's a practical usage of our space technology. You can't do that with rockets. You can't go to other stars with rockets. You not only have to make the light speed barrier, you have to break it, and you have to break it by tens of thousands. And this, fortunately, was built into the system from the get go of the creation of the universe. So, what I'm working on now is the development of the slip wave, which is a means to develop anti gravity emitters. Along with the big surprise is, not only do you make an anti gravity emitter, but it's a coming from a dipole, which is a north south pole or positive negative pole field. And out of the other end, the positive end, is a gravitational field, but not like the one that the planet generates. This one is a non-contractive, which
Mhm.
then allows us in the spaceship to have some sort of gravity that you can stand on, but you don't get inertia, so that the ship can be turned, the anti-gravity here, the gravity here, you fall and are pushed forward using the slip wave technology, and you don't feel inertia. So you can do an instant acceleration, and within the bubble of the slip wave, it will feel like you're not moving at all. And this
Mhm.
is why our alien buddies don't die when they go from 0 to 4,000 miles an hour in a second or more, or make a right
And
turn.
and that's been one theory here, that people said we could never reach light speed because it would crush us. Now, how does this fly in the face with the wormhole theory of traveling between
It
universes?
it doesn't. The I'm gonna get the wormhole out of the way, because that's a really kind of a bad concept overall. You may be able to do something equivalent with that in a Stargate technology, but what I'm talking about is you modify space with this field, and what it allows you to do is travel through that space as if it's almost not there. So
Hmm.
because you pull it apart, now it's less of what it was than before. The density drops dramatically. And so if you just think about distance equals rate times time, if you actually reduce the distance in
Mhm.
space between here and wherever you're going, you can go there much faster. The math will back up what I'm already saying because you're physically changing the metric of space, the distance, what's there, what's in it. And that's the key to breaking the light speed barrier. And that's the key to going at whatever speed you need to. And that's the way I think our alien friends are doing for the most part. I'm sure there's more advanced technologies that use stargates, that use interdimensional travel. We're talking
Okay.
civilizations that are millions of years ahead of us. I'm just sticking to the technology that we can possibly build, electrogravitic model mainly. There's a
Mhm.
magnetic model, but that's much more difficult to build. Uh, and I'm working on the program that allows us to design these crafts like the flux langer that Mark McCandlish has talked about. Well, I know how to design and build that now.
Now have, without how to ask this question, do you have, an outlet for your work? I guess is what I'm trying to say is, do you have some place where you can take these theories where they can be manufactured, for lack of a better term, and put it
Oh,
into use?
no, I have no connections there. I work alone. I've always worked alone. I'm hoping at some point there is one person that I know of who's interested, and I'm going to give him the information. I'm not really worried about getting a patent or anything. I know that we need this technology. Why do we need this technology? Because I know our Earth's core is unstable, and at any time there could be massive earthquakes or massive volcanic activity that could pretty much end life here on Earth. So we have to, we will not be safe until we have the technology to bilocate to another world. And the sooner we
Interesting.
get that done, the better. Because there's
Okay.
certain things I've discovered about the core of not only this planet, but of the sun, all other planets and stars. There's a basic ingredient that mankind is not aware of yet. And it
How
has
have
to
you
do.
discovered that?
Well, when I was writing the book, I went into the cosmology theory using the theory of super relativity, and I
Mhm.
discovered that star formation, planet formation doesn't make sense the way it's explained today, which is basically this. Somehow, the gases in outer space hydrogen get twisted into a knot, then compress, and then, get immensely dense and start fusion. And I says, this makes no sense because the gravitational force is many, many values, powers less strong than the electromagnetic field. So the hydrogen particles that are in outer space are never going to compress with gravity on their own. There needs to be a gravitational source. And the physicists know this and they dance around it and say, well, somehow it just happens. But their evidence demonstrates exactly how it happens. All stars are formed with something called a neutronium sphere, a rapidly spinning device made of nothing but solid neutronium. Where did that come from? The Big Bang. How do I know it's there? All their evidence, and I'm talking about astrophysics, every time a star blows up, what's left is a neutron star or a black hole, which is, in my theory, just a super dense neutronium sphere. And instead of assuming that it was there already, they've made up the idea that the explosion created the neutronium sphere. And I'm saying no, it was already there. It was what formed the star in the first place by gathering the hydrogen, pulling it in, compressing it, and starting the fusion process. Unfortunately for us, I believe planets are created in the same way and create all the elements. That's why we have all the elements here on Earth. They didn't just fall
Mhm.
out of the sky. They were
Well,
manufactured right here. And it needs to be that way in order for this system and other systems to develop life, because you need all the elements. You just can't have a few. You can't expect them to fall from outer space randomly, somehow getting all the elements and be. They were manufactured here. It's a part of the intelligent design process. So
You
this is
you'd
where
said
we're
some,
at.
and you'd said something earlier that caught my ear, and I wanted to ask you to expound upon it. You talked
Okay.
about almost an intelligent creation of the universe. You had
Yes.
made mention of that. Getting close to our break, but if you can just give me the basic concept theory that you have on this all being created from one area. What is that?
Well, I didn't just, yeah, my theory uses the idea of intelligent design. Uh, I know for sure there's a God. I know that for sure there's a Jesus, and religion is a vitally important thing. Not, and it could be any religion. The aliens have a universal religion. God is a universal being, and we tend to think locally, but there are advantages you get if you assume intelligent design. That's how I stumbled onto the neutronium sphere theory, because I used, and we'll wait until after the break because it's slightly technical, but once you hear it, you're going to say, oh my God, how did they not think of that? And it will
No.
make sense. And it's an intelligent design theory.
Okay, and as we get ready to go to our break, this has been a very in-depth scientific discussion. But when we come back, I want to talk about intelligent design. I want to talk about your walk through the spiritual psychic world also. So
Okay.
when we come back, we're going to get into that. Folks, stay with us. More to come on this very deep intellectual conversation. Stay with us. We'll be back after these messages. We are back on Paranormal Stakeout. My guest, Mark Fiorentino. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Mark?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, okay, great. Um, we started to talk before the break about your theory, your thoughts on intelligent creation of the universe, and I've heard you speak about it before. Kind of go back into that theory, and then from there, I'd like you to move on into your introduction as a youth to the paranormal side, the spiritual side. So if we can start with your
Okay.
belief on the creation of the universe, we'll move from there.
Well, I assumed something immediately. There was something suspicious in physics. There's a little known phenomenon about the neutron. If you take a neutron by itself and put it into outer space within 15 minutes, it's going to break down and turn into a proton and an electron. And so, well, what's the big deal there? That's hydrogen. And I says, what does the universe need when it starts up in the beginning? Lots and lots of hydrogen. So now I say, what if I assume, as physicists think that's just a random thing that happens? They don't, the energies in this, and they have all these kind of like mathematical explanations, but they don't know why the neutron does that in
Mhm.
that particular situation. In other situations, the neutron will stay stable for billions of years when it's combined with other protons or other neutrons. That,
Mhm.
I say, is no accident. That is a clear case of intelligent design. So I assumed that that was done in the beginning so that the neutron, there would be I'm assuming now there's going to be a large sources of neutrons coming from somewhere, because that's the basic building block we need to assemble a new universe from the Big Bang. So then I went and said, oh, well, I'm pretty darn sure that black holes are just super dense neutron stars. So 8 solar masses or more, it becomes a black hole. And when those stars blow up, there's a black hole there. But I'm saying that was there in the beginning. It's what gathered the gas and created the star. So in the
Mhm.
beginning, there was a supermassive black hole made of nothing but neutronium. It blew open, neutronium plasma comes out, gas. Within 15 minutes, it starts converting to hydrogen, just what's needed to build the universe. And along with it was spheres of various sizes of neutronium, and they're all spinning, which is perfect. You need them to be spinning so that frame dragging technique will gather the gas, but not blend it right to the hard surface.
Mhm.
It will crush it and then start stars building. It just needs to go into gas clouds and gather them. And so all of the galaxies have these large black holes in the center. They're spinning around. All the stars are spinning around that from the frame dragging technique. And it explains everything. All the creation of stars, everything comes from the beginning where there was just nothing but neutrons. And so that's part of my, and where did that come from? The Father. Father God, uh, as Jesus has called him, our Father who art in heaven.
Okay.
So, and people get upset if you bring religion in, but I can tell you from having many encounters and a lot of study with near death people, that issue keeps coming up, the creation issue. And God says, I did create this. And I could give you specific words that he said to Father Rick
Mhm.
Wendell on this subject, and it confirms what others, many others, have heard from God on the other side.
Who's
Eh,
Father Rick Wendell?
Father Rick Wendell is a man who became a priest. He wasn't a priest at the time of his near death, but his
Mhm.
near death experiences, changed his life, and he became a priest. He's on my website. I have a little video of him. He's was on
Mhm.
YouTube. And basically, he says all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God. And I use those words, the power of intention, throughout my book. We're going down to the
Mhm.
very core of reality. And either it just popped out of space from nowhere, or there was a creator. And the creator is telling people in near death experiences, I did this. And you guys need to get on board when, know that. And that's important knowledge for all of humanity and for any species anywhere. So
Uh,
that's part of my equation, spiritually speaking. The other thing is I did have encounters with psychics when I was very young and
Mhm.
throughout my life. And the first psychic that I saw, Martha McKay,
Mhm.
mentioned something not to me directly, but to my friend that came in after me. And
In
there was a
Cassadaga.
reason why at Casadega, that's right.
Yeah.
And there was a reason she did that, because she didn't want me, or they didn't want me, asking questions about it. And when we got in the car and we drove off from Casadega to Daytona Beach, he mentioned that she said, boy, someday you're going to make a great discovery and you're going to be world famous. I says, huh, I wonder why she didn't tell me that, because that's kind of an important point to leave out.
Slightly.
And yeah, well, then after that, five more psychics kind of confirmed it over the years. There was something big coming. And that's when I started studying more near death stuff and come to realize that all people come to this earth with a life plan. And so I've kind of stumbled upon mine by listening very closely to what they've told me over the years. And I've kind of
Mhm.
put it all together as a bunch of clues
Mhm.
that are basically saying you came really primarily to do what you're doing right now, and to do this math and to do this science and to talk about bringing religion and spiritualism and science back together again, because science really comes from religion.
And I agree with that. Now, just for folks, in case you don't know where Cassadaga is, it's this little spot north of Orlando, Florida. It's I don't know if you can explain it yourself, Mark. It's a spiritualist
Capital of
town.
the world.
Yeah, and
Yes.
it's quite an interesting place. But
Yes.
your concept here intrigues me because it comes makes me come to think of a term that I've used several times in the show, the collective conscious, or that everything is wrapped together into one.
Right.
Is that kind of where you're going with this? That
Yeah.
because you mentioned there's no coincidences, which I personally believe also. There's synchronicity as well as
Right.
there's no coincidence.
Right.
Um, is that what you're thinking, that just everything's connected, whether we call it God as we do in the Christian faith, or Muhammad or Buddha, all the same thing? Is that where
All
you're
the
going
same
with it?
thing. There's been cases where people have died simultaneously. In one case that I read, a Christian, a, a Hindu, and a Muslim were struck by lightning. They all went up the tunnel together. They all saw God at the same time. And as they were looking at him, the other one was seeing that, hey, he's seeing God looks like a Christian God with, the great white beard. And the other one's
Hmm.
saying he's seeing the well of souls. And the other one's saying he's seeing Krishna. They all could look at each other and confirm that the other one was seeing the God as they expected him to be,
Hmm.
but it was one in the same. And God really, as I come to understand it, is not that worried about which version we have. He wants a personal relationship with each and every one of us. The religions are just a road to get to that destination. Like there are many roads that go to New York City. You could take any of these roads and still get to New York City. It's the same thing with God. Uh, it's a universal being, and we need to start thinking bigger, and that we're not the only people in the universe, and we're not the central part of the universe. We're not. We are
That's
just one little speck amongst billions and billions, an infinite number of other worlds and universes that are out there. If God could create one universe, why not two? Why not 10? Why not a million? Why not a billion? So what I'm saying is that what we're experiencing now has been likened to like inside of a shared dream of God, inside of the mind of God, so that everything that's created really comes from the super consciousness. And then we are all connected. And many people say that when they get to the other side, they're connected to everything. They have knowledge of whatever they want. There isn't anything that's not knowable once you're back in the spirit realm.
mhm.
It's a bigger picture than any of us have imagined.
And I would agree with that. Now, getting back to the psychic connection on this, because I know you had the experience in Casadega. I believe you had another experience where you were actually connected with your mom. Um,
Yes, definitely. That's how I got the evidence that I know for sure there's an afterlife and we don't die. In that particular experience, I was living in Charlotte with my first wife at the time, and for various reasons, it was recommended that we go to a psychic there in Charlotte. June Riggs was her name. She actually lived somewhere here in Florida at the time, and met her in her hotel room, and almost immediately after we started talking, she said, and I was just sitting there just taking it in as I usually do. I say as little as possible because I don't want to lead them on.
mm,
And she says, your mother's here. And she says that she's been sitting in the golden yellow chair in your bedroom at night when you've been praying to her and asking her to sit there. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, only I knew that. I didn't even tell my wife. I would say my prayers at night. My mom had passed away, and I would try to have a conversation with her about my day and everything. And I would invite her to sit in that chair. So that's evidence, rock solid evidence that I know happened and for sure. And so, what I'm telling everybody else out there, you could take this to the bank. Your parents, your family, your friends, they don't die and disappear into oblivion. They live on in the spirit realm, heaven, and that's part of this process that we're going through here.
well, We're about ready to take our last break. And when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So, folks, stay with us. We've got one more segment coming. Please stay with us, and we'll be back right after these. And we are back on Paranormal Stakeout. My guest, Mark Fiorentino, tonight. What a interesting conversation this has been. We kind of ended the last segment discussing how the fact that there's life after we leave this realm that we're in, translate into ghosts, spirits. Considering your theories and the things that you've experienced, you believe in ghosts?
I believe in spirits. I'm
Okay.
not sure what you mean by ghosts, well, like
It's a
kind of spooky things. I believe in spirits, definitely. There's no doubt, and guardian angels in particular.
okay.
But is there malevolent spirits out there? Yeah, there does seem to be some of those too. Uh, but
Can
I
the
have,
spirit of can
okay.
the spirit of somebody we love, a family member, come back to us in a form that we recognize? In your opinion?
Yes, I believe that's just happened recently to me, but I cannot talk about it because
Okay.
I want evidence and I want somebody to give me the evidence. But I had something very dramatic happen, and I believe it was from somebody trying to communicate to me directly. But all I can do is say, yeah, I think that's what it is, but to get evidence like from another psychic again. So if I talk about it, then it'll invalidate the evidence that I
Understood.
might get at some point.
And evidence is what we're searching to prove all of this beyond a reasonable doubt, as I would say in my
But I have
formal
other
position.
evidence. I have direct contact with spirit beings during my divorce time, the first 7 years after I got divorced many years ago. I was visited in my bedroom at night from prayers. I mean, I was in desperate, bad shape, and they came to me and proved that they were there in a beautiful way
Hmm.
and an inspiring way and a comforting way. And I needed that more than anything because I was on the edge. I was in a wreck of a human being at that point.
And that seems to be the time when these things happen to us.
I've even had my life saved by, directly by a voice that spoke to me. They prevented me from getting into an automobile accident that most assuredly would have taken my life had I been hit head on, as I might have been had I not been warned.
And that is an issue, Mark, that is important to me because a lot of us have had experiences, and certainly for millenniums, for generations, people of every socioeconomic level, uh, profession, have had experiences. And those
Yes.
of us that have had, we know what's real, but we have not yet reached a point where we can prove it. So I guess what I'm wanting to find out from you is your theories, your studies, your work has gotten us to this point. Is that going to provide the proof for us in the future, do you think?
Um,
Or how
I've
close
given
do you think
this
we are?
I've given this a lot of thought in getting the proof that a physicist would need. The problem is that their thinking, it's more than just needing evidence. It's their very thinking that is programmed in such a way is that it excludes even any evidence or possibility of evidence that could convince them that there's a spirit realm. But you know what always does? What always takes the most devout atheist and turns them around?
Mhm.
A near death experience. Like Howard
Okay.
Storm uh, was teaching at, I believe it was not Harvard, Yale. And he was an atheist. And most of the professors there are, but he had a near death experience and he got enlightened in a hurry.
Mhm.
And there's nothing like personal experience to convince even the most skeptical skeptic that things are different than they thought. And maybe what we're going to get eventually, because we're getting right now, as I see it, there's an army of people coming out of the woodworks, having near death experiences, and getting on the internet and giving us those examples. The evidence is just flooding in. Now, they would all have to be liars for this not
Mhm.
to be the case, and it's just not so.
And that's my point too. Unless there's a huge portion of the population that's crazy, or a huge portion of the population that are charlatans, there's got to be some answer to this. And going back to taking this all the way back to the unified theory, do you see this all being connected through that theory? Through
Well,
the
if imagine this, imagine somehow somebody backs me up in authority, some physicist, some scientist somewhere. I mean, that's the key, the doorway that gets you in
Mhm.
to. I mean, if somebody does solve, like I am claiming, solving the unified field theory problem, and as well as what I've just come to realize, the method for particle motion, which Einstein was looking for. These are big deals. These get verified. They verify my math, and they come to the conclusion that this can be scientifically tested, and it can, and it works. It's going to give me credibility to maybe start people thinking. He says, well, he did come up with that theory, and that was right. He did come up with that explanation, and that was right. And he's admitted that he's asking the Father or the Creator,
Okay.
if you want to know how something works, go to the creator of that something and ask him. When we talk to psychics and mediums who are real, the real deal, we're basic, and anybody we talk to on the other side, you're basically talking to God because they're all connected, and
That's where I was going to go with that.
they're going to give you valid information to what degree they can. They can't just fork over all the answers to everything. We have to earn it. We have to live it. This is a challenge, and we have to experience it. So they're guiding and helping us, but they're not going to say, now, today I want you to do this, this, and that. Don't deviate from that.
Well, I
That's
think
not
we got a
going to happen.
problem. We got a problem with it too, because not all psychics, and I've known some real fakes, and I've known some that I have a lot of
Yeah,
faith in,
right.
but none of them tell you the same story. Basically, some of them have the same general theory of what's going on,
Right.
but
There
but
are
there's some
things I know what
so
you're
that
talking about.
exactly. So that I mean, so there's a human element into it. So what you're seeing is the entire from the unified theory to the dealing with the psychics. That all comes from the Father or the greater being.
Right. Yeah.
That's what this all boils down to.
This is all a part of an exercise. Um, it's a much bigger picture than we'll be able to express tonight and really get out there. We could just hopefully give the people out there the idea that says, hey, I came from that place too. And I
Mhm.
have a mission. Everybody does. Everybody. There's no
I know.
exceptions. And just if they could start thinking along those lines, and you want to start working on what you came here to do, whatever that is, and it's in your heart mainly, and you have to keep working toward that. It's different for everybody, but as long as you agree to work with God, then you start getting all the help. I said, okay, he's on board, and we can
Mhm.
start giving him information. He's not just doing his own thing to whatever it is for his ego or for his pocketbook or whatever. He's doing it for the right reasons. He's gotten on board train, or the team God, as I like to say,
But
and
until
that's where I want to be. That's where
but
everybody should.
until we and you're right, if folks that have had experiences, you can't take away or change what they've experienced or what they believe. But until we reach a point where we can provide evidence, and I don't know that we'll ever get there. It is my fervent belief that we will if we keep trying. But wherever the evidence takes us is where we have to go,
Well,
and we need the evidence to do that.
maybe if we ever get to meet the aliens, that's a good question for them because they they realize there's a God. They don't question that, as far
Yeah,
as I know.
I was going to ask you that. So, you had any personal experience with aliens, with extraterrestrials?
I've interviewed people that I thought were the real deal,
Okay.
and in-depth interviews, and ask them some of these questions. And without a doubt, they say they believe in a universal God, a God that
Yeah.
is everywhere and is caring and connected to everything. People
Well,
have no idea the power of
that
God.
that's another thing, and that's another thing I've run into too. Is you talk to folks in the UFO community, and you can't really oftentimes get the same description or stories from them. They're all
Well,
they vary
maybe,
quite a bit.
yeah, maybe somebody's telling the truth. Maybe some of these people are making it up. You know,
No,
I don't know.
no, no. But
That's part of the challenge that we got to go through with in the UFO
it is
community and the spirit
all the
guide.
communities, and
Yeah.
when we close our minds, when we close our minds and don't look for the other possibilities, just because, then we'll never learn and go forward. Um, in
Right.
our last couple minutes together, how can folks find you, Mark? Your website,
Okay.
and tell us.
Yeah. www.super-relativity.com. Super-relativity.com is my website. You can see some of my videos there. I also have a YouTube channel. You can go find me there. There's a link on my website to take you straight there. It's got some of my shows like this on there that people gave
Okay,
me permission to copy. Um, I got links to my two papers that are on ResearchGate, and I'm going to be uploading a third, hopefully here in a couple of months, uh, which will have the method of building anti-gravity emitters.
okay,
Very important work, and it also explains what Einstein was working on, which was the way that particles move, the method.
excellent. And as we begin to close out too, I just want to make mention to everybody, check us out at paranormalfbi.com or indianriverhauntings.com. Again, you can also check out what we do on YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341. Don't forget, check out all the great programming on the X Zone TV and Broadcast Network. Great shows on there. And you can get a hold of me at Ghost Guy at paranormalstakeout.com. And also check out all my shows at Paranormal Stakeout. I said .com, I meant .org. I apologize. It's Ghost Guy at paranormalstakeout.org, or check my show out at paranormalstakeout.org. So I appreciate it. Folks, thanks for being with us tonight. It was a great show. I want to thank my guest, Mark Fiorentino, for being with us. And until then, take care of yourselves, love your family, hug your kids, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a great night, folks.